Welcome to the second episode of VOLLEYTALK Season 2, brought to you by Basic Sport. I am Maithili, your host, here to talk about more data, more analytics, and obviously more volleyball. Just a quick recap about VOLLEYTALK. VOLLEYTALK is a show where we will be talking about data in volleyball with sports experts in the industry. Moving on, I'm very excited to announce our guest for today, and I'm sure you all are too. Joining us today to talk about data in volleyball is one of the most well known figures in volleyball all over the world, John Speraw. Where do I even start with John? John is the head coach of the US men's national volleyball team, guiding the team to multiple to reputed tournaments, including the Olympics, the FIVB World Championships, the FIVB World Cup, and the FIVB World Volleyball World League, just to name a few. Under him, the team won a bronze medal in the 2016 Olympics in Brazil and also at the 2018 FIVB World Championship in Italy and Bulgaria. On top of that, they won the gold in the 2015 FIV World Cup and a bronze medal in the 2019 one. I could go on, but then I'd be going on for a very long time. Apart from all this, he is the head coach of the UCLA Bruins men's volleyball team and the former coach of the UC Irvine Anteaters. As the UC Irvine head coach, he guided the Anteaters to three NCAA titles in just 6 years. And a fun fact about him, he is the only individual in men's volleyball history to win an NCAA championship as a head coach, as an assistant coach, and a player. Which reminds me, he also played for the UCLA Bruins men's volleyball team, where he was a middle blocker and helped the Bruins win two NCAA national championships. Phew, what amazing achievements, John. Welcome to the show. It's great. It's really, really great to have you. I know it's extremely early in California, and we really appreciate you joining us. What is it
Mentally,
like?
it's
Yeah, sorry.
yeah,
Thank you
it's
so much.
it's early. I got my cup of coffee here, and I'm ready to go. And thank you for that nice introduction. That was very well done. I hadn't seen me play volleyball in quite some time, so that was good old video and nostalgic.
Yeah, that was a great video about your job, of you playing, and then about your family, your little girls. It looked very nice
Mhm.
to see them up on the screen.
Yeah, thank you.
How are you doing today? How's everything going on your end?
Yeah, it's going very well. The international season this summer was quite intense. It was very short. The VNL and the World Championships were right next to each other, so there wasn't much time off. So when
Right,
the season ended, I was able to come home and spend a little time with my family. We officially start UCLA today,
right.
so I've had a few weeks to have a nice slow pace at home and reconnect with the family and get ready for UCLA. And I think UCLA will have a good season, so I'm excited to get going.
That's great. I hope you do well this season and make it and win the NCAA championships.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So just a quick question to get started. How and when did you get into volleyball? Like, what makes you so passionate about the sport?
I originally grew up in the United States playing basketball and, well, a lot of different sports, but basketball was my primary sport. And when I got into high school, when I was about 16 years old, which is a little late these days, but at the time, it was the first time I'd been exposed to volleyball. My parents didn't play, it wasn't on TV. I didn't grow up in a beach community, which is where volleyball was extremely popular,
Right.
30 years ago. And so I was exposed at high school through one of my best friends, and I just loved playing it. It's hard to, I just enjoyed playing it. And I had an opportunity to go play for a couple great coaches. I was very, very lucky. I happened to have a great high school coach, and then there was a local club around here that happened to have a great coach as well. So at a young age, I was impacted by two really outstanding coaches, and
Right.
that accelerated my career and allowed me to be seen by UCLA. And then I went there not as a top recruit, but more as a role player,
Hmm.
and had a nice career there. And of course, the coach at UCLA is a legend in the United States,
Right.
the winningest coach of almost any sport in the United States of America, Al Skates. And so
Yeah.
Al not only tutored me in the sport, but after I graduated, I was thinking about going to medical school at UCLA, and he talked me into helping out the team, and I enjoyed coaching. And next thing I knew, here I am. So I have a lot to owe Al and the experience that he gave me. And so I just honestly, I love playing the game. And then when I had a chance to coach, I enjoyed the interaction and helping other people play better. And so that's where I am.
Right. So if you weren't a volleyball coach, you would have been a doctor instead?
There's a good chance. I mean, I majored in microbiology and genetics when I was at UCLA. I come from a family that has a number of doctors and healthcare professionals, so I was around it quite a bit. I worked all the way through school, and I
Wow.
worked at the UCLA hospital, so I was exposed to a lot of different environments. That I worked in a pretty intense job at UCLA, so I saw a lot, and so I was very aware and into the medical profession.
Oh, that's very interesting, and it's great that you got the push when you had to volleyball. I think the sport of volleyball definitely like is very I would say very privileged to have you as there
No,
as a
thanks.
mentor. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think a
Um,
lot of people when they see volleyball for the first time, I mean, I talk about how I just enjoyed it. If
right.
people observe, if they've never seen, particularly men's volleyball, if they've never seen men's volleyball, in the
Right.
United States, women's volleyball is a lot bigger, a lot more girls play. It's a bigger women's sport here.
Hmm.
If somebody is seeing and observing men's volleyball for the first time, they are typically stunned at how fun it is to observe live. And I think it's just a fun sport to watch. I think it's a fun sport to play. And the more people that see it, the more people will play it.
Great, great. That's nice to hear. I have a question about you going back to your alma mater as a coach for
Mhm.
the same team that you had played for. What was the difference from when you were a player to now as a coach? Like, how's your experience been?
Oh, it's been great. UCLA is a really special place. It's a special place. Academically, it's one of the best universities in America. From an athletic perspective, the facilities and support and traditions are the best in America. We have such a long history in all sports of success, and some of the legends in each sport came from UCLA. And so to be a part of that is an amazing honor. I just enjoy being around other great people, and UCLA attracts great people. And I loved it as a player when I was even in the weight room and I was working out next to a baseball player who was going to go play in the major leagues, or a basketball player that was going to go play in the NBA. All across the board, track and field, and it's still that way. And so for me to be around great coaches, great players, continue to learn, to me that's the most important thing. And I'm in an environment of incredible learning. And obviously, I'm attached to the UCLA experience as a former player, and to have a chance to impact the experience of the next generation of UCLA players and to make sure they have the best experience is something I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, it must be just like you said, going back to your university, like where everything made a difference in your life. I think that's a very exciting thing to be doing right now.
That's right.
Um, so a question about Indian volleyball. Do you think we have the potential to become as big at the international level? Do you think maybe the Prime Volleyball League has given it the push that it needed?
I was the head coach of the U.S. junior national team when India hosted, I believe it was 2005, the World Championships, the Junior World Championships. And we flew into Mumbai and then went over to Vishakhapatnam.
Uh-huh.
I hope I said that correctly. And
Yeah.
I was very. We played India in. I don't think it was in the tournament. I think we played them in a scrimmage before, and I was very impressed with the talent of that team. They were big, and they had some good players. And just observing, particularly having a professional league there. And I'll be honest, when I heard about the PVL and the rules that they were using, I thought to myself, here's one of the largest countries in the world. They're fans of volleyball, and they're creating this league that is very innovative. The scoring system with the rally to 15 and the first sets, playing all the sets, and then the super point and some of those things, I think is really creative. And I think it solves a problem we've been discussing within our sport for a long time, which is how do you create a sport that has a much more consistent time frame so that it can be packaged for television. And I told people here, without even really knowing the people there or what the reception was of the Indian volleyball fan, that scoring system could potentially be the future of the sport. In fact, before I've even known anybody in India, I've had the UCLA team play India volleyball because I was so interested in that scoring system. I think it's great. I would love to watch more, and I've seen some clips. I've not seen an entire match yet. I'm very excited about the opportunity in India. I think it's fantastic. I know you have successful sports, cricket, and others, and I just know that there's probably incredible opportunity in India, and I'm excited to see where that league can go.
That's yeah, that's very interesting to hear. We just actually had the auction for the second season for PVL, and we'll be starting the second season soon. So you should tune into a match, to a full match maybe. And it's interesting to hear about the scoring strategy, the scoring for PVL that you were talking about. But do you
Mhm.
think when players are playing with this particular scoring strategy, it would affect them when they want to play like international tournaments, which has the usual, the normal scoring strategy?
No, I don't actually.
Yeah.
I think if you're playing rally scoring and the value of each play is the same. Now, maybe there's within that league, I don't know. I haven't played it consistently. Maybe there's some
Right.
statistics that you can see, or maybe you're picking up some things about how you would play each match. Um, I think the focus and intensity of the players to play each point is the same. And I think the once you go back to playing the 25, maybe it feels a little different when you go back to maybe playing for USA or India or any of these other countries that players are coming from. But I think you probably get through that in a couple weeks. And so the game is the game, and I don't think it would have any effect at all.
That's good to know. That's good to know. Yeah, I think these new rules and the points just add more excitement. But yeah, like you said, if it doesn't affect the long run, that should be good. Um, Going back to your UCLA and your national team as a coach, I read in an article that you were once given an ultimatum to choose between the UCLA job and the US national team one, that and you picked UCLA.
Hmm.
What was the reason behind this? Is it because you wanted to go back to UCLA, which was your alma mater, or what
Hmm.
other reasons did you have?
It was a hard one.
Yeah.
There, so I finished at Irvine, and I had this really unique and fortunate moment where I had my contract was done at UC Irvine. The opportunity at UCLA was there, and the opportunity at USA. And I thought a lot about it. Initially, I thought I would just go coach the United States team solely, and but after thinking about it, there are some business aspects to how things work here in the United States. And I had been in the UC system, UCLA, UC Irvine, UC San Diego, UC
Right.
Santa Barbara, Cal. It's part of a state educational system here in the United States. That's the preeminent educational system, maybe in the world. I've heard lots of people talk about how the UC system in California was innovative 50 years ago, and it's
Hmm.
probably more, and has really become one of the great educational institutions in the world. And they have their own retirement system. So I'm actually a government employee, and so I started working in the UC system when I was in school. And so I was a student that was working in the system, and then I started my career as an assistant coach at UCLA, and then I went to UC Irvine, which usually as a coach you bounce out of the UC system, but I had accumulated all these years in the retirement system. And when UCLA recruited me very well, and when they demonstrated to me the value of that retirement system and staying in that retirement system for another period of time, it was almost too good to pass up. And I'm still in that system and accumulating years towards retirement. And I think I'm now total over 25 years now of employment in the UC system. So that's very good for me. And so that became a little bit more of a business decision at that point. Um,
Okay.
the chance to coach the national team simultaneous came up about 8 months later after I'd turned it down with conversations with Doug Beal. And the athletic director at UCLA at the time, Dan Guerrero, was supportive of that. And so then we embarked on this dual role, which only works because the academic calendar at UCLA is the exact opposite of the international calendar. And I think it would only work in men's volleyball and probably only work at a UC system because the UC academic calendar is just a little bit different. We start in late September,
Okay.
and then the men's season in the United States goes until the first week of May, which is of course when all the international players start coming home. So
Right.
the calendar works out uniquely well for me.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. And I guess the fact that you took the UCLA job and then the national team still had to just have you, so I guess it worked out for everyone very well.
Very well.
Um, yeah. I don't know if you have to think back for this, but in all your years as a coach or as a player, be it at the college or the national or the international level, what is your most favorite match and why is that so?
As a player too,
Yeah.
there, that's a very difficult question. There's been a lot. I certainly the it was interesting you showed it. I haven't seen it in such a long time. But me as a player, I had a little bit more hair, not a lot, but a little bit more hair. And that group of players that I was with was really really special.
Right.
You saw Jeff Nygaard, who's now the head men's coach at USC, and Eric Sullivan, who's the assistant coach at Texas. Kevin Wong, who's actually was later interviewing me because now he's been in broadcasting and a very successful businessman. And Stein Metzger is now coaching the beach women at UCLA. And so there's just that was a really special group of athletes. And we
Right.
had been upset the year before and came back and had a great season and won that championship. And for me, that was very special. I think as a player, I'm sorry, as a coach, there have been a lot. Certainly, the first championship for me at Irvine was unbelievable.
Right.
That was very improbable, and maybe not at the time, but certainly when I took that job and to be in that position 5 years later, and that was an incredibly special group of individuals as well. The other one that I really remember vividly was the last championship at Irvine because I at that moment I'd been there for 10 years and I knew that there was going to be a change in place. I didn't know it, but I had a pretty good idea. And the arena was amazing. We beat USC at USC, but it was sold out, and there was a lot of UC Irvine people there, and the place was electric, and we won. And I remember just walking out on the court and being totally at peace because I knew that I'd done the job there. No matter what happened, what transpired afterwards, whether I would go to UCLA or the national team or stay,
Right.
I knew that if I decided to leave, I could do so in good faith because I'd done everything I could there and finished with a win, which you don't
Yeah.
get to do in sports very often.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I remember just being very much at peace in that moment, and I'll always remember that.
Right. I get what you mean by finishing with a win because there's some athletes or some coaches who are always looking for that last win before they
Yeah.
try to move on. So yeah, that makes absolute sense. Moving on to like our analytical volleyball analytics. Do you think does analysis actually help in creating a strategy to improve maybe the match winning percentage? Like how much importance do you give to analytics in your coaching? Would you say?
Oh, I'd say quite a bit. Um, I mentioned Al Skates. Al was somebody that was very innovative in the statistical area before computers even had an impact in the game. That's actually how I got my start. Al would have a number of people that were taking statistics by hand on the bench. And so he was beginning to talk about side out percentages and scoring percentages and rotations and how to evaluate athletes and really put them in the right place at the right time. I think he was decades ahead of where we are today and certainly at the time. And I think that innovation is really what helped him win. I think there's a lot of different analytics that can impact both training and the match, and they're different. And um, I think it's very important. I think all coaches take a look at that. It guides my decisions on substitutions. It guides my decisions on matchups. It certainly even allows me to communicate to the athletes exactly why we're potentially winning or losing a set and how that will change our emphasis mentally about
Right.
how we're playing the rest of that set. So I think the balance here, of course, is now data is so available. What data are you looking at, and how does that make a difference in the athletes in the moment? I do think there's very few things that you can say to the athlete in the moment that will really make a difference. So you have to choose wisely because they're in this intense competitive environment and their mental space. And I think the ability to make changes is somewhat limited. And we talk about that all the time. How much information do you give your athletes, even in a game plan, even hours before the match or days before the match, and you're talking about this opponent that you're having? How much information is an athlete able to take in and execute on? How much do you give them? Because now we can give them a lot.
Yeah.
And I think as coaches, we want to work hard. We tell our athletes to work hard. We're working hard. Part of how we feel good is by giving them lots of information and data because that's available now. So I think we have to make good decisions about what information we use, but certainly it makes a difference in how we coach.
Right, right. That's a good point you make about the amount of data that we have right now and how you like how it used to be done manually before. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like I'm sure we have data for like even like a slight movement that's a lot of data to deal with. But we're
Oh yeah.
sure you might have used like multiple tools to analyze the data that you get and to share reports with players, like you were mentioning. But
Right.
uh, like usually like you said the reports are like so long, right? Like we'll just show you one on screen right now that we are quite familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Can we have that on screen, please? So, right.
Okay. Okay.
So this is a volumetrics, a report from a volumetrics report that we have. Like usually it's really long, like it just keeps on going for like a lot of different pages.
Yes.
Um, what would you say are like what would you say are like some of the key areas that you would look at as a coach, like before or after a match? Um,
Oh, okay. What would we look before? Certainly, you're looking at distributions. You're looking at tendencies. I mean that chart right there obviously
right.
demonstrated some tendencies. How you're positioning your block and defense is. We talk obviously quite a bit about that. We talk about our offense too. You're evaluating the opponent's strength defensively and where there might be areas for you to attack. You're looking at hitting percentages and choices on perfect pass or medium pass, or I mean, there's a lot of different things we're looking at.
Right.
Certainly,
Right.
serve reception tendencies on
Mhm.
serve reception. I mean, that's a big part of the game today. So, how are you positioning your passers to take care of the opponent's best serves and best servers, and how do you strategize there? And so I think there's quite a bit. I mean, we have multiple video sessions for each opponent, each
Oh, okay.
focused on a particular aspect of the game. One is defensive, and then we have another one that's offensive and serving. Um, we're doing individual video sessions with guys potentially to look at specific attackers that they may be defending. So there's quite a bit of video. We use a lot of video. I think the visual aspect of the game is something that a lot of players
Yeah.
they can utilize that. We've talked about what they can and can't do, but I think the ability to study video is very impactful.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, even like the most basic statistics that you look at, like it looks like there's a lot that you look at before and after a match. Just not like a few things, not just a few things, but like there's a myriad of things that you have to look at, for match winning in percentage, I would say.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah, and
yeah,
and more is even today. You're getting more and more data about where the setter is on the court,
yeah,
and based on that, what does he do? So it used to be you used to get just a rotation and the distribution, but now it's rotation and then distribution based on location. That's where I think
right,
it can get a little bit more challenging for athletes. In the moment, okay, they're in rotation one. The distribution is X,
right,
but the distribution is Y when he's 5 feet off the net, and the distribution is Z when he's 10 feet off the net. And then, some athletes can process that, of course, but I
yeah,
think there's some athletes that they
yeah,
can't. And so you also have to try and understand that, or how much time you have to prepare. Each environment's a little bit different. If you're
right,
playing at UCLA or at the PVL or some of the pro leagues in Europe, especially a non-Champions League team, they're playing a match a week. I mean, you could do
Mhm.
quite a bit of training where maybe you could actually do that in practice, and so that will help a player execute. You're playing internationally, you're playing at the World Cup, you're playing 11 matches in 15 days. So I mean, there's the ability to be adaptable and change is much more challenging. And then how do you do that in the training block before? I mean, these are all strategies we've tried over the
Right.
years,
Yeah.
some more successfully than others. But I think each environment also dictates what kind of information you can give your athletes and how much time you have to prepare.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Like depends on the kind of tournament you're playing, if it's a season. So yeah, that it depends on the time you definitely have.
Mhm.
So I know you were talking about rotations. This is a very very basic question, like for beginners and even for me when I was starting off as an analyst. I couldn't quite understand the concept of a rotation. Like, is it possible for you to like maybe explain it a very simple way for like the
Mhm.
basics of rotations, maybe?
Sure. So you have everybody serves in volleyball. You
Right.
rotate, and
Mhm.
so once somebody serves, then you have, and the other team sides out. You now have the ability to side out, and once you side out, you rotate one position. And so as the setter rotates around, we use the setter's location to define a rotation. And in that rotation, there are rules about where the front row and back row and players relative to one another have to stand. Now,
Right.
within those rules, there's some flexibility, and you can be creative offensively, and a coach can be creative offensively about where you position them to make them the most effective they can be. And certainly, there's systems that have developed over the years that are more consistent, and
Right. Right.
certainly that players become specialized in those areas. But each time you side out and rotate, you're in a new rotation. And because there's
Yeah.
six players on the court, there's six
Mhm.
rotations. And so we study each one of those rotations because they have a specific system within each one of those rotations.
Right. So you look at you also probably analyze which rotation a particular player is good in, and then you try to give him more opportunities in that particular rotation.
That's right. And I mean, as you were flipping through those slides, I mean, you're seeing exactly what we look at as a perfect or good pass, a medium pass. A medium pass is a ball that's passed somewhere around the 10-foot line, maybe a little bit beyond. Bad pass is obviously something that only one hitter can be set, and then transition, which is of course when you're serving the ball and the ball comes back to you. How do you distribute the ball? Each one of those are very important
Right.
categories of
Mhm.
analytics that we look at to try to predict what a team will do, who they will set, and where that hitter will attack.
Right. Right. That explains a lot. That gives a lot of clarity into how rotations work. To be honest.
Hmm.
Um, My next question for you is, how do you think the growth of volleyball is in the US in comparison to other popular sports? You were mentioning cricket in India, but like in the
Hmm.
US, I know there's American football, there's basketball, there's baseball. How do you think volleyball is in comparison to these sports?
Well, on the women's side, it's huge. It's the number
Right.
one team sport in America for girls. So they play at the university level at over 300 universities, Division One, over 300 Division Two, and over 300 Division Three. So there's literally more than 1,000 universities, which is our main developmental system that we have here in the United States because we do not have a professional league. And our athletic organizations revolve around academic institutions. So all of our athletes are both students and athletes, which is, I think, unique in the world. There's Canada does the same thing. There's some other places that do that. Um, on the men's side, it's much smaller. There's, I think, 27 Division One men's volleyball teams, 30 something Division Two, and over 100 now Division Threes. But it has been the fastest growing sport for boys in America over the last 10 years. And we've seen a real nice growth trend. We're also trying to intentionally do that. I co founded a foundation in the United States called the First Point Volleyball Foundation. And you can find information at that at firstpointvolleyball.com and see how we've attempted to intentionally take philanthropic dollars to grow boys and men's volleyball in the United States. It's been incredibly successful over the last 5 years. And so we're trying to make inroads here. I mean, the ideal would be to also not only expand the academic athletic opportunities in the United States, but to also have a professional league here too. But I think that's challenging in the environment, mostly because of what you mentioned, just the strength of the other sports on
Right.
television, which is what drives revenue for professional teams.
Hmm.
And there's just such a history and culture here in the United States of American football and baseball and soccer has now started to make some inroads. You can see that in the MLS, which has grown quite a bit here. I read an article yesterday about its growth even recently. The valuations of each team has really skyrocketed, and so maybe the soccer is now starting to take hold here in the United States. So there's opportunities, but it takes quite a bit of financial capital. It
Yeah.
takes a lot of intentional effort. We're starting to see it on the boys' side. We're excited about the growth. I mean, at the collegiate level, there's just so many more good volleyball players than there
Right.
used to be. So that's encouraging for certainly the national team in the future of the United States volleyball.
That's great. And also the point you made that about women's volleyball team being bigger is something really different from what we hear
Mhm.
about sports in general, right? Usually men are dominating in most of the sports. So that's a very good thing to hear, to be honest. But um, yeah, so yeah, thank you so much for yeah, giving us an insight into how the growth of volleyball is for men. Um, so another question that I have is, let's say when you're given a team with new faces, and you also know some of them, some of the people that you've coached on the team are old, but there are also some new people. What are
Mhm.
the first few days like? Like, as in, what are the first steps you take to like bond with the team or share your
Yeah,
knowledge? How what kind of ice breaking sessions happen over there?
that's a good question because that's different in each environment as well.
Right, right.
What I've never done in my career is I've never coached professionally. I've never gone
Okay.
to Europe or anywhere to coach professionally. So that would be something different that I can't speak to. But I think it would be interesting because you take all these guys that maybe some have played together, but you're bringing in a lot of people. You're doing it for 1 year, and maybe you you have this team meeting where you're like, "Hey, John, this is Mark. Nice to meet you." You know,
Right, right.
I think there's a little less of that on the national team because on our team here, maybe you're bringing in one or two players every once in a while, and but you have a core group of athletes that maybe have been together as long as 4, 8, 10 years. Um, so on the national team side, what makes that unique and special is the long term relationships you have with these athletes. But by the time I get done with UCLA and getting ready to go back and play with the national team, I'm excited to get back because there's a lot of guys that I've known for a very long
Right,
time
right.
and
Yeah.
have a very good relationship with. At UCLA, you have a group of athletes, and they have a 4 year academic cycle, and so you're basically 25% of your roster changes, and so you have new freshmen who come in very nervous,
Yeah.
and so you'll we have first team meetings, and there's at this point we go through a recruiting process where we're actively trying to go find young players, boys, to come to UCLA, and um, so a lot of the players know the young guys, but you will go out for team dinners. There's a lot of opportunities to interact. As you asked that question, we could probably be more intentional about ensuring that, hey, let's really get to know one another. That happens, of course, naturally because you spend so many hours together over the course of time. But I think
Right.
there might be room to have some more get to know you opportunities early on for the young athletes. It would probably make them more comfortable. But yeah, I think there's so much time. I really believe in the value of just going out to dinner. Even
Yeah.
on the national team, we try to do that when we're in a city where we have a night where we get out of the hotel and find a
Hmm.
nice restaurant and go. And
Yeah.
I think that's very valuable. I really feel like more and more that's something I just really try to do as much as we can.
Yeah, definitely. I think team dinners or like team just getting out and doing together things together as a team. I think that definitely helps in getting to know your teammates, having a rapport with them for sure. Yeah.
For sure.
I have a follow up question about like the coaching style. I saw a video of you from a while ago, maybe 2013, I think, where you spoke about how some of the players get motivated when a coach yells at them, but most of them again also break down after that. Like I believe the positive to negative feedback in the video that I saw, the ratio was 10 is to 1 then. And
Mhm.
how has that changed? Like, maybe in the last 9 years from the video that I've seen, like, has the ratio gone up or down? What do you think the coaching style? What kind of a coaching style do players right now prefer?
I think it's increasing in terms of the need to not be what we would call old school or a yeller and screamer. I just think it's listen. You have to bring energy.
Hmm.
Um, your personality, for whatever reason, it does become the personality of the team to some degree. And so I have a tendency to be really calm and very analytical, and so I know my teams can be very calm and very analytical, and so sometimes I intentionally have to bring energy and enthusiasm, and sometimes you have to expect great things from your team. So if you're choosing to really get on your guys in potentially a negative way, it has to be about very, very specific things, and those things have to be ensuring that they're working hard. Okay, I mean,
Right.
if you're yelling at an athlete because they hit a ball out of bounds or because they missed a play, you're in dangerous territory. I think if an athlete doesn't go for a ball and you're like, hey, we got to get that ball. I think you have room, minimal room, but room to work there.
Hmm.
I think what I've learned and reflected on even over the last couple of years, because you were talking about what I've learned over the last 9 years, is there's been teams that have driven me crazy, and whether it's their own dynamics, whether it's their lack of effort. And I remember one of my athletes said, "Coach, you've yelled a couple times and it's just not working." And this is an athlete that I really respected, very
Right.
intelligent, experienced.
Hmm.
And he goes, I just think you should just throw him out of practice. And I'm like, that's pretty good. So, I mean, and at my level at UCLA where they're young and they're just leaving home and, you know, there could be a lot of behaviors that even from not returning phone calls, not their academic counselor, they missed a meeting, the responsibility of some young men is not high. Um, so now we just have a two strike rule. Like if you miss an appointment or don't answer an email or you're late or whatever, okay, that's one. Two, you're out. And so I've
Uh-huh.
just started. Now I just instead of yelling and screaming, I just go home, get your stuff,
Yeah.
go home. I start throwing them out. It's much
Hmm.
more effective. Now that being
Right.
said, I got on the guys yesterday at UCLA. I mean, they weren't working very hard on defense. We have a good team this year. There's a little bit of we're good, and so we're going to be good, and that's not enough. Obviously we need to we are not good enough. And so I got on them yesterday, but that's very it's pretty rare. I would bet I don't think I got fired up and yelled at the national team once this summer. I don't think I did it one time. And
Right.
um, at UCLA last year, I bet you it was one or two. I don't think it was very often. Obviously, that's a little bit of a longer season, but and with guys that are a little younger.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's happening less and less. Um, Here's the thing too. When I get frustrated, at the end of the day, when I go home and I'm reflecting on that moment, what I realize is I haven't done my job. I haven't done my job well enough. So if I'm to the point where I'm so frustrated that I'm yelling at the guys, at the end of the day, it's on me. It's
Mm.
my fault. And so I have to, okay, if that situation is so frustrating that I'm at that place most of the time,
Right.
it's because I haven't created an environment where that behavior is ingrained. I haven't reached that athlete to really make sure that he understands the expectation. The culture isn't where it needs to be. I mean, these are all things that I think at the end of the day, if a coach is yelling, I mean, for the most, not always, I mean, sometimes it's justified, but I mean, if the coach is yelling, it's probably because he or she has not done their job well enough yet.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear because, like you said, it's different in the college level and then it's different at the national level, right? Because it depends. They're much younger players, so like their attitude is different. The way the national players behave is different. So like, I'm sure your coaching style also has to differ a little bit between both the
Hmm.
teams. I would say, yeah.
Right.
Which it brings me to my next question. Like you were talking about the mindset of young players, right? Like usually youth these days is like they're very diverted. They have so many distractions in the world. There's many. I wouldn't say like even if you want to concentrate on a particular career or a particular job, like it's very hard to focus on something. What
Hmm.
would you say? What would your advice be for like coaches or maybe parents to bring a certain shape, to bring a certain discipline in the kid's life or in the player's life, to develop them in a better way?
I just think it's interesting, and you mentioned young people, and obviously, and parents. I mean, you start
Right.
getting. Obviously, I have young girls. I have a 5 and 6
Yeah.
year old at home, and so this is. It's interesting. I think about the feedback we give athletes. I think there's a lot of room to improve how we communicate with athletes, and I know that that's changed for me.
Hmm.
For example, when I was coaching at UC Irvine, I got the job when I was 30 years old, and nobody really they knew who I was, but it wasn't like I had a name or anything. And I was young, and so when I was telling them, "Hey, I think you should do this," they were like, "Okay, you're great." There wasn't, I don't know, I didn't have the reputation I have now after being a coach for 20 years and coaching the national
Right.
team. And now if I take an 18-year-old kid at UCLA and I'm the national team coach and have a reputation, and I say, "Hey, we need to do this," there's deference, there's a little bit of natural distance between me and the athlete. Some of it is my position, some of it is age. So I think that has changed over the years. I have to be aware of that, and I think how I communicate. The other thing too is how much to communicate. 20 years later of being a head coach, I know a lot more, so it's a lot easier for me to. I could talk the whole time, and
Right.
so, but that's not necessarily best for performance. So how do we talk to athletes? I was listening to a parenting podcast the other day that I thought was really interesting, and it was talking about encouragement versus praise. And so when you're talking about praise, you're just, "Hey, you're doing so great. You're doing great." And encouragement is, "Hey, you did this behavior and you worked really hard and therefore you've got the A." Or you've been putting in the time in the weight room and now you're jumping higher.
Hmm.
Or, you've been spending extra hours in the gym working on your passing and look at your numbers right now.
Hmm.
And so associating a behavior with an outcome and making sure that the student or your child is understanding that the process is the most important thing. I am constantly talking about process with my daughters. It happened the other night.
Right.
My daughter she's a very good reader. Okay. She's very, very good, but she didn't do very well on a reading test. Now listen, she's 6. We're going to be fine.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, this is an out. She did it. She had a terrible test. Fantastic. This is the greatest thing ever. And she was very upset. And so here's a 6 year old. She's in tears. And how interesting is this, right? I mean, I think the pressure, we talk about the pressure on athletes, the publicity of social media and everything that's on these athletes and these expectations. Athletes today have a hard time with all that. Even if they don't want to admit it, it is there and it's real. And here's a 6 year old who's feeling some pressure based on a reading exam when she's literally just learning how to read. This is great. So we talked about how many times she read the book. And she only read it by herself this time. Previous tests, she read it with mom and she read it with dad. She read it a few times. So I was able to say, well, maybe what we could do next time, if you'd like to do better, is you read it with mom, read it with dad, read it 3 times. Does that sound like, and and what's going to happen is she's going to do better. So the next time she does better, I'm going to say, well, you read it more, you read it with mom, you read it with dad, and look at the result. I don't have to
Right.
say you're the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
You're good for, I'm just going to say, this is what you did and this is the outcome that you got. And that's why. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And I think that'll be a very powerful teaching moment.
That makes so much sense. Like instead of
Mhm.
just saying you're doing good, like you're telling them why they're doing good. So that definitely makes a lot of difference. Yeah.
That's right.
I remember you said that you started volleyball at the age of 16.
Hmm.
What do you think is the right age to start? Like, is six? I know you said 16 was a little later, but how
Hmm.
do you think schools like or parents can? At what age do you think they can encourage kids to start volleyball?
I'm not sure how it is in India with parents. I
Right.
know in the United States, there's this real push from parents who want their children to excel, to try to specialize at an early age. And so I see it now with 6-year-olds in soccer here in the United States with my daughter. And I worry about that. I actually think one of the benefits of volleyball is that it's not really a sport you can play when you're 4 or 5 or 6 years old, because trying to keep the ball off the ground and the dexterity required to do that is, you can kick a ball around, you can even shoot a basketball, you can swim, you can do those things, but it's very hard to play volleyball. And maybe that's better, because I think so many young players, if they get, their parents are on them to play and be the greatest thing ever, and they come to volleyball just a little bit later. I do think that being introduced to the sport at a young age is great. We're very cautious with my daughters. I want them to have fun. I think there's also a difference between the curriculum and how we
Hmm.
teach athletes at a young age versus a curriculum for how we teach elite performance. I think a lot of people probably want to ask me about how to coach young players. I'm the wrong guy. I am. I'm the wrong guy. I have been
Right.
coaching at the highest level for so long,
Hmm.
and if we're talking about how maybe 12 is a pretty good age to introduce volleyball, and while they're 12 years old, please let them play a bunch of other sports. And so maybe by the time they're 14, they have some intrinsic,
Right.
they want to play the game and they make the choice. I think that's important. So
Right.
maybe introduce, I mean, 10, 11, 12, introduce them to the game, let them play that plus another couple sports until they're 14, maybe 14, 15, allow them to maybe specialize if they want to,
Hmm.
maybe 2 sports. I played 3 sports a lot as a kid. I didn't specialize until I got to university. I was playing basketball and volleyball all the way through high school. So I think getting back to the two different paths, I think when we're coaching young people, it's got to be fun. It's got to be short, and the drills need to be shorter, and it's got to allow them to experiment and create. And I don't know. I just think there's so much more room for that. And I went to my daughter, and this is us being cautious. Now she's starting to, obviously she sees me watching video. She sees us on TV. She goes to matches, and she's 6, and she wanted to go to a volleyball camp,
Oh wow.
and because her friend who has an older sister was going to volleyball camp, and she got invited. And my wife and I were like, "Uh-oh!" Like I almost don't want her to go this early. And okay, you can go, but you're going to be. And she was the shortest girl in all the camp. There are
Oh
50
no.
girls, but she's the little one. And and I was watching the coach work, and it is some high school girl that was running she did a great job. And it was like every little activity or drill or whatever, it was fun, and it was 5 minutes, and then they were running over and getting waters and talking, and then they were going back and doing it. And I was watching. I thought it was fantastic. And I wouldn't even know how to do that. I don't know what drills would work for a six
Right.
year old girl. So I think there's a different. We need to train coaches differently. And
Right. Right.
so there's probably some, hey, what do you need at the top? What are you seeing about how the game is played? And can there be some communication between those two tracks? I think so. But I think it's very important we understand that if you're trying to take a 12-year-old girl or boy and teach them like I'm coaching the national team, you may not get the outcome that you want.
Right. Like you mentioned, I think shorter drills because of the attention span of kids, because it's
Yes.
it's way lesser than how it is for older kids, right? I think that would be
Yeah.
a good area to start off at. Um, just so in India, right, the mainstream volleyball is just starting to take place because we can't even think of like youth or the grassroots as it's a very small niche currently. So, as per
Hmm.
your experience, like what do you think? Maybe volleyball clubs or teams or leagues or even something like Prime Volleyball League should do to nurture volleyball from an early stage. Is there something these organizations can do to
Mm.
encourage younger people to join volleyball?
That's a very interesting question. There's something I know. There's a group here in the United States that I've gotten to know over the years called the USYVL, the United States Youth Volleyball League, not associated with USA Volleyball. It's an independent
Right.
organization. I can't speak for them, but I remember them talking about what they found to be the most effective, and they've created an organization where the parents are just teaching and having the kids play, and they find a lot of success just doing with one-off clinics where they're coming into an area and they're just introducing kids to the sport, and if they like it, then maybe they can organize more fully after that. But just these introductions to the game for kids. And here in the United States, of course, it's going through educational systems again. So it's like from bottom to top, that's where a lot of these organizations can reach children. Um,
Mhm.
but I think there are clubs, there are organizations here in the United States that also work with youth, and so that system is available too. It's a very good question. I think there's probably some expertise that India could draw on that I may not have, but I think the key is to have kids see it. Having the PVL and having it be on television in India, I think is very impactful. We talk about us not having that quite a bit. I think young people potentially aspire, if you're a young player playing basketball and you get to watch the NBA, you
Mhm.
know, that's very enticing to young players and inspires them that this is something I may want to do. Um, so I think the fact that you have a professional league and it's on TV is a very it's a nice place to start. We wish we had it in the United States. But I think how you go out and intentionally maybe use those pro teams in those cities to go out and do clinics. If I was coaching one of those teams and I was looking to grow that sport, I'd be asking my athletes to do a clinic every once in a while at in the local community and really bring exposure. I think social media, we talk about the negatives, but the positives are it's a way for us to get the word out about something in a very effective network and for free. And so I think
Yeah.
we've talked a lot about how social media should play a role in how we're growing men's volleyball because I think men's volleyball in general is a little bit of a niche sport. Certainly is here in the United States as well. And so I think we probably could continue this dialogue. I think this is a good question. I think it's something that if the people in India were interested in continuing to discuss, I think I'd be interested in continuing to have that conversation because I think we could learn from one another.
That's good to know. Like that would be very encouraging, I'm sure. And just an audience question: like, do you have any plans to come to India, or are you, if you're invited, are you open to that? Like, if you could continue this discussion, maybe.
Oh yeah, 100%. I went that one time. I think it was 2005,
Right. Yeah.
and I really enjoyed it. And so I would love to go back. It's interesting. I don't know if you remember, but at that time, Mumbai had that storm that came through that rained like 20 something inches in a 24-hour period, and and so it was shut down. So we actually flew into Mumbai and couldn't get to Vishakhapatnam. So we had to go
Oh,
to Hyderabad and stay and train in Hyderabad for a few days. So I've been a few different places in India. I would love to go back. I'd love to
that
see
is
the PVL. I'm not just saying this because I'm on your broadcast here, but
right. Right.
when I heard about what they were doing from a scoring
Right.
system, my immediate reaction was, oh, that's very smart. And obviously knowing the sports culture in India and the size and opportunity there, I just felt like, wow, that potentially is the future of the sport could come through India. I mean, you have to think like that if you're growing your sport there. And I think
Yeah.
there's amazing opportunities. So for sure, I'd be very interested in coming and seeing it.
That's really great to hear. We would love to have you as well, John. And
Really be fun.
um, yeah, yeah. Just one last question for you regarding volleyball statistics and analytics. We have so on screen will they'll just be coming up right now. So we have some. Just a second, yeah.
Hmm.
So when we look at these, let me see if we have that right now. So this is just a second. So like yeah, when we look at these attack charts and short charts,
Hmm.
at first go like what do you read to understand which one was the better team or which one was the better player like within the team? What would you suggest we look at initially, like when you look at these? graphs on the screen.
Okay, so I'll just tell you what I looked at first,
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
guys can take.
yeah.
Okay, go back to the previous slide there. So I
Yeah.
looked at this, all attacks.
Mm-hmm.
I briefly glanced. I'll literally walk through what my brain just did. Okay, I
Yeah.
briefly glanced at the shot directions, just briefly. Like my eyes were initially attracted to the shot direction, just. And then I was figuring. Then the next thing is I was like, go big hut X. Okay, so I got that, and then I immediately went to the number of attempts and the hitting percentage. So 7 attacks for 4. I think that's 429. My eyes aren't great. Sorry. So 429. Uh, and then I looked at the BIC, and then the direction of the BIC is always interesting to me. So then it was attacked with that's a good range, is what we would say. So, 6 for 500, that's good. The hut, so a couple high balls there. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously the goes are hit down the line a little bit more, not very much cross court, and both for decent percentages. That's what I looked at initially.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Got it. Thank you so much. It's good to see you in action when we just show you some charts.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
realized one time I was doing a coaching clinic and I realized they threw up some stats and somebody asked me, "What are you looking at?" And because I got quiet as I was looking at it. It was like a much more elaborate hitting chart. So I was evaluating it, and then I did that. I said, "Well, I'll just tell you what I'm looking at right now. I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this. Okay, I'm evaluating this." And I talked my way through it, and the coaches loved
Yeah.
it. And so, I mean, that obviously was one player, I think, and obviously it's a good player. They're
Right.
hitting very well at outside, and they're getting set the pipe. And so, obviously, if you're getting set the pipe, then you're usually probably somebody that your team wants to set.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. That's really interesting to hear. And so yeah, that's all the questions we have for you, John. Thank you so much. It was really a privilege to have you on the show and to answer all the questions we had in such an informative and an encouraging manner. We would love to hear some parting words from you, maybe about your experience and maybe some advice and encouragement for our Indian volleyball coaches and players.
Oh, goodness. Some parting words. First of all, I know I've said this now twice, but I am excited about what's happening in India. I saw that Volleyball World signed a television package as well, and I'm excited to watch more matches this year. I've seen some clips, but I haven't even seen a full match yet, so I'm very excited about it. We've had some American players that have gone and played in the league. I've heard wonderful things. So I'm excited to see what the future of India volleyball holds for the sport. I feel like the sport has given me so much. I'm so grateful that I've been able to have a profession and the experiences, these unique experiences that I've had. I mean, even last month I was in Poland, and you're in these arenas with 15,000 people, and it's just an incredible environment. And there's just not very many people that have that chance. And I feel very lucky to be in the position I'm in. And so I want to give back. And so the idea of how I give back through sharing information, helping support growth of the sport. I really believe volleyball is an opportunity for young people to have a lot of fun, to learn, certainly to have educational opportunities here in the States, to have a professional opportunity in India. I mean, these are things that I'm deeply engaged in. And I'm going to start sharing a little bit more about my experiences. I feel like I really enjoy these experiences. I've enjoyed this experience with you today and the opportunity to speak to an Indian volleyball audience. I really enjoy interacting with coaches. I think it's a way for me to impact a broad range of players. So I've gotten more involved in social media, and we'll start sharing some more information. So I'd love to continue dialoguing with the Indian volleyball audience and coaches that are interested in learning more. I think that's something that when I can be on a court and I can get to know a young coach, or even somebody that's been coaching for a while, and it's very interesting to me the questions that people want to have answers to, and I'd like to figure out how to give people access to ask those questions of me, because I really feel like I wasn't some superstar volleyball player, and I came into the sport late. I
Right.
went to UCLA as not a top recruit. I wasn't the superstar when I graduated. I didn't have an international career because at the time, this is now going back 20
Hmm.
plus years, but we didn't have a pro league in the United States. And so the only way to go play professionally overseas, this is before YouTube and being able to send videos of how well you played. We couldn't go play in Europe. I mean, nobody knew if you weren't on the national team or had enough family money to get you over there or anything like that. Like I didn't have any money and I didn't play on the national team. So when I finished my career at UCLA, I was done and I knew it. I had no avenue to continue to go play. And so I got into coaching and here I am. I'm the coach of the national team. And that to me is an interesting journey. And I think a lot of people probably are like, okay, I'm not a superstar or I'm not this or that. And how can I do that? Well, you can. I did it. And so I think I'd like to share that journey a little bit more. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak here today. I'm going to try and engage a broader audience through social media so people can find me on Instagram and
Right.
LinkedIn is something I'm
Mhm.
starting to get involved in right now quite a bit just because I think on LinkedIn, there's a lot of volleyball coaches that want to
Right.
know
Right. Yeah.
how do I, and so I'm starting to recognize that there's a way for me to share some of my thoughts and experience and encourage the dialogue and encourage the growth of the sport and encourage how do we make players better and how do we impact them and
Right.
what have
Right.
I learned and what am I still learning because I'm still learning a lot and
Right.
so I think I'm gonna be involved there. So if people want to interact with me, please do.
Yeah.
I know this fall I'm probably going to launch a website and get going on that too. And so I'm
That's
excited
great.
about continuing to share my story and certainly interested in how I can help volleyball. I want to give back, and so I'm excited about India volleyball. I'm excited to see the season. Good luck to everybody out there and to you and what you're doing here. I think it's fantastic. This production has been. Thank you for the effort. Even the intro video was fantastic. So I really appreciate the effort put in.
That's a great journey you've been on, John. And like I'm sure all our Indian coaches and players would be excited to like definitely reach out to you and continue the dialogue. Like you said, it's you're a great I would say volleyball expert, and like I'm sure we'd be able to learn a lot from you. And thank you so much for coming on the show. It was definitely a privilege to have you, and it's truly enlightening. Your experience as a player and coach and all the accolades that you've received are something that all of us should definitely aspire to be and aspire to have for sure. And really, really, really hope that Indian volleyball gets to meet you sometime soon, and you get to you come to India sometime. And very good luck for the UCLA season that's coming up.
Thank you.
Definitely hope that you win it this time. Thank you
Yes,
so
we've been close. 3 of the last 6 seasons, we've been in a fifth set loss there in the final four. So it's time. It's time for the
much.
Bruins. We're called the Bruins. So
Right.
it's
Yeah,
time
yeah,
for the
yeah.
Bruins to get a title.
Yeah, let's the here's hoping that you they do, and good luck,
Yes.
thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for coming on. And yeah, that's it from us, everyone. Thanks for the viewers for joining us. I hope you learned a lot from what John has spoken about. We at Basic Sport loved the show, and just a reminder that the highlights and the recorded video will be available on YouTube. See you again on our next episode with some more interesting guests and more volleyball. And that's it from us. Thank you so much.